Having covered some of the effects of species on different types of ecosystem processes, and then what happens when those species come together in a community, and the role of functional diversity in ecosystem properties, in the end, we need to integrate the effects of traits on ecosystems. There's a lot of different examples in the books about how species interact and how they can be integrated into thinking about their effects on ecosystem properties. Organisms affect ecosystems in multiple ways through the actions of multiple traits. And essentially, this part is similar to, it's another coda for a chapter. It's an end of the chapter that tries to put a little bit of perspective on some of the abstractions that we've done. And one of the abstractions that we've used when we've talked about of species is to really just consider one trait at a time, or sets of correlated traits that occur. And we need to do that because we need to reduce the dimensionality by which we think about species. Any individual plant or animal is going to have a lot of different traits that differentiate it from other different species. But it's difficult to capture all of that variation, and so we reduce the dimensionality. We reduce the number of dimensions that we talk about as far as plants or animals are concerned to just maybe one or two at a time. And this is the basis of a lot of the functional classifications. So we might classify species into being either, say, C3 or C4 or CAM. And that might be one good differentiation of plants. But there's other dimensions to these plants besides just their photosynthetic pathway. So we might have shallowly rooted and deeply rooted grasses. So we could have C3s that have shallow roots and C4s that have and C3s that have deep roots, as well as shallowly rooted C4s and deeply rooted C4s. So in this case, we're going to make functional classifications based on one trait or two traits, something like that. And we use those classifications to generally make categorical groups, something we call functional groups. What this last section goes over is essentially the idea of a functional matrix, that we can classify species categorically along a single axis, and we might have C3 and C4 species. The idea of the functional matrix really gets across the idea that there are lots of different dimensions to differentiating species. And there might be one axis of differentiation that's important in one context, but another axis that's important in another context, and a third axis in a separate context. And we can differentiate species on 1, 2, 3, 4, up to as many dimensions as you want. And all of those might be important under different situations. So that's the idea of a functional matrix. Simply when you go through there, it's not necessarily to categorize species as just category A or B, but to think of them in a broader context of a lot of different traits.